Welcome to Grace Lutheran Church here in Hendersonville, North Carolina. My name is Vicki Marthaler, and I'm serving the Women of Grace this year as their president. Now, the Women of Grace have a wonderful tradition. Every December, they have a Christmas tea. But as you are well aware, this is not a usual year, and because of the COVID, we are unable to gather together as we would like to do. So we have decided, as women of the church, that we are going to bring the Christmas tea to you. So I'd ask if you have a cup of tea, please make it. Grab a cup of coffee or maybe a hot chocolate and enjoy yourself for the next 30 minutes or so as we present and give to you as a gift this Christmas a reader's theater. We have several women from our church who are going to read a little bit of a Christmas story, a poem, and of course we will end reading the gospel. But for right now, get comfortable. And I'm going to begin with my favorite story at Christmas time. It's called A Cup of Christmas Tea, and it is written by Tom Haig. And so it begins. The log was in the fireplace, all spiced and set to burn. At last, the yearly Christmas race was in the clubhouse turn. The cards were in the mail, all the gifts beneath the tree, and 30 days reprieve till Visa could catch up with me. And though smug satisfaction, well, it seemed the order of the day, something still was nagging me and would not go away. A week before, I got a letter from my old great aunt. It read, "Of course I'll understand completely if you can't, but if you find you have some time, how wonderful it would be. Could you have a little chat with me and share a cup of Christmas tea?" She'd had a mild stroke that year. It crippled her left side. Though housebound now, my folks had said it hadn't hurt her pride. They said, "Oh, she'd love to see you. What a nice thing it would be for you to go and maybe have a cup of Christmas tea." Oh, but boy, I didn't want to go. What a bitter pill to see an old relation and how far she'd gone downhill. I remembered her as vigorous, as funny, and as bright. I remembered Christmas Eves when she regaled us half the night. Oh, I didn't want to risk all that. I didn't want the pain. I didn't need to be depressed. I didn't need the strain. And what about my brother? Why not him? She's his aunt too. I thought I had it justified. Oh, but then before I knew, the reasons not to go I so painstakingly had built were cracking wide and crumbling in an acid rain of guilt. I put on boots and gloves and cap, shame stinging every pore, and armed with squeegee, sand, and map, I went out my front door. I drove in from the suburbs to the older part of town. The pastels of the newer homes gave way to gray and brown. I had that disembodied feeling as the car pulled up and stopped beside the wooden house that held the Christmas cup. How I got up to her door, oh, I really couldn't tell. I watched my hand rise up and press the button of the bell. I waited aided by my nervous rocking to and fro. And just as I was thinking I should turn around and go, I heard the rattle of the china in the hutch against the wall, the triple beat of 2 feet and a crutch came down the hall. The clicking of the door latch, the sliding of the bolt, and a little swollen struggle popped it open with a jolt. Wow, she stood there, pale and tiny, looking fragile as an egg. I forced myself from staring at that brace that held her leg, and though her thick bifocals seemed to crack and spread her eyes, their milky and refracted depths lit up with young surprise. Come in, she laughed the words. She took me by the hand, and all my fears dissolved away as if by her command. We went inside, and then before I knew how to react, before my eyes and ears and nose was Christmas past, alive, intact. The scent of candied oranges, of cinnamon and pine, the antique wooden soldiers in their military line, the porcelain nativity, oh, I'd always loved so much, the Dresden and the crystal, I've been told I mustn't touch. My spirit fairly bolted like a child out of class and danced among the ornaments of calico and glass. Like magic, I was 6 again, deep in a Christmas spell, steeped in the million memories the boy inside knew well. And here among old Christmas cards, so lovingly displayed, a special place of honor for the ones we kids had made. And there, beside her rocking chair, the center of it all, my great aunt stood and said, how nice it was I'd come to call. Oh, I sat and rattled on about the weather and the flu. She listened very patiently, then smiled and said, what's new? Thoughts and words, well, they began to flow. I started making sense. I lost the phony breeziness I use when I get tense. She was still passionately interested in everything I did. She was positive, encouraging, like when I was a kid. Simple generalities still sent her into fits. She demanded the specifics, the particulars, the bits. We talked about the limitations that she'd had to face. She spoke with utter candor, humor, and good grace. Then, defying the reality of crutch and straightened knee, on wings of hospitality, she flew to brew the tea. Wow, I sat alone with feelings that I hadn't felt in years. I looked around at Christmas through a thick, hot blur of tears. The candles and the holly she'd arranged on every shelf, the impossibly good cookies she still somehow baked herself. But those rich, tactile memories became quite pale and thin when measured by the Christmas my great aunt kept deep within. Her body halved and nearly spent, but my great aunt was whole. I saw a Christmas miracle, the triumph of a soul. The triple beat of 2 feet and a crutch came down the hall, the rattle of the china in the hutch against the wall. She poured 2 cups, she smiled, and then she handed one to me. And then we settled back and we had a cup of Christmas tea. Truly one of the classics for this special season. And now we'll continue with our readings, And I would like to call on the first of the ladies who are going to read to you today, and her name is Kathy Stankar. Welcome.
Thank you. I would like to read a story called The Chimes by Irma Bombeck. Everything is in readiness. The tree is trimmed, the cards taped to the doorframe, the boxes stacked in glittering disarray under the tree. Why don't I hear the chimes? Remember the small boy who made the chimes ring in a fictional story years ago? As the legend went, the chimes would not ring unless a gift of love was placed on the altar. Kings and men of great wealth placed untold jewels on the altar, but year after year, the church remained silent. Then, one Christmas Eve, a small child in a tattered coat made his way down the aisle, and without anyone noticing, he took off his coat and placed it on the altar. The chimes rang out joyously throughout the land to mark the loving gift of a small boy. I used to hear chimes. I heard them the year one of my sons gave me a tattered piece of construction paper on which he had crayoned two hands, folded in prayer, and a moving message, "Oh, come, Holy Spit." I heard them the year I got the shoebox that held 2 baseball cards and the gum was still within them. I heard chimes at Christmas. They all got together and cleaned out the garage. They're gone, aren't they? The years of the lace doilies fashioned into snowflakes, the hands traced in plaster of Paris, the Christmas trees made of pipe cleaners, the thread spools that held small candles. They're gone. The chubby hands that clumsily used up $2 worth of paper to wrap a cork coaster are sophisticated enough to take a number and have the gift wrapped professionally. The childish decision of when to break the ceramic piggy bank with a hammer to spring the 59 cents is now resolved by a credit card. The muted thump of pajama-covered feet padding down the stairs has given way to the click of her knee-high fashion boots. It'll be a good Christmas. We'll eat too much, make a mess in the living room, throw the warranties into the fire by mistake, drive the dog crazy, taping bows to his tail, return cookies to the plate with a bite out of them, listen to Christmas music. But Lord, what I would give to bend low and receive a gift of toothpicks and library paste and to hear the chimes just one more time.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm sure that all clicked off some memories for all of us. And now we will have another reading, and I welcome to the podium Joyce Eddy. Joyce?
I'm Joyce, and I would like to read to you The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry. $1.87. That was all, and 60 cents of it was in pennies. 3 times Della counted it, $1.87, and the next day would be Christmas. There was clearly nothing left to do but flop down on the shabby little couch and howl. So Della did it. Della finished her cry. Then she stood by the window and looked out dully at a gray cat walking a gray fence in a gray backyard. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she had only $1.87 with which to buy Jim a present. She had been saving every penny she could for months with this result. Only $1.87 to buy a present for Jim, her Jim. Suddenly she whirled from the window and stood before the glass. Her eyes were shining brilliantly. Rapidly she pulled down her hair and let it fall to its full length. Now, there were two coveted possessions of the James Dillingham Young household. One was Jim's gold watch that had been his father's and his grandfather's. The other was Della's hair. So now Della's beautiful hair fell about her, rippling and shining like a cascade of brown waters that reached below her knees. She did it up again, nervously and quickly. On went her old brown jacket, on went her old brown hat. With a whirl of skirts, she cluttered out of the door and down the stairs to the street. When she stopped, the sign read, Madame Sofroni, hair goods of all kinds. One flight up, Della ran. She was greeted by a large madame with a business attitude. Will you buy my hair? Asked Della. I buy hair, said Madame. Take your hat off and let's have a look. Down rippled the brown cascade. $20, said Madame, lifting the mass with a practiced hand. Give it to me quick, said Della. Oh, and the next 2 hours tripped by on rosy wings. Della was ransacking the stores for Jim's present. She found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim and no one else. It was a platinum fob chain, simple and chaste in design. As soon as she saw it, she knew that it must be Jim's. It was like him, quietness and value. The description applied to both. $21 they took from her for it, and she hurried home with 78 cents. When Della reached home, she got out her curling irons and went to work repairing the ravages made by generosity added to love. Within 40 minutes, her head was covered with tiny, close-lying curls that made her look wonderfully like a truant schoolboy. She looked at her reflection in the mirror long, carefully, and critically. If Jim doesn't kill me, she said to herself, he'll say I look like a Coney Island chorus girl. But what could I do? Oh, what could I do with $1.87? At 7 o'clock, the coffee was made and the frying pan was on the back of the stove, hot and ready to cook the chops. Jim was never late. Della doubled the fob chain in her hand and sat on the corner of the table near the door. She heard his step on the stair, away down on the first flight, and she turned white for just a moment. She had a habit of saying silent, simple prayers, and now she whispered, "Please, God, make him think I am still pretty." The door opened and Jim stepped in and closed it. He looked thin and very serious. Poor fellow, he needed a new overcoat and he was without gloves. Jim stepped inside the door. His eyes were fixed upon Della, and there was an expression in them. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor disapproval, nor horror, nor any of the sentiments that she had been prepared for. He simply stared at her fixedly with that peculiar expression on his face. Della wriggled off the table and went to him. "Jim, darling, don't look at me that way. I had my hair cut off and I sold it because I couldn't have lived through Christmas without giving you a present. It'll grow out again. You won't mind, will you? I just had to do it. My hair grows awfully fast. Oh, say Merry Christmas, Jim, and let's be happy. You don't know what a beautiful, nice gift I've got for you." "You've cut off your hair?" asked Jim laboriously, as if he had not arrived at that patent fact yet. "Cut it off and sold it," said Della. "Don't you like me just as well anyhow? I'm still me, without my hair." Jim looked about the room curiously. "You say your hair is gone," he said, with an air almost of idiocy. "You needn't look for it," said Della. "It's sold, I told you, sold and gone too. It's Christmas Eve. Be good to me, for it went for you." She went on with a sudden serious sweetness. "Shall I put the chops on, Jim?" Out of his trance, Jim seemed quickly to wake. He enfolded his Della. Then Jim drew a package from his overcoat pocket and threw it on the table. "Don't make any mistake, Dell, about me," Jim said. "I don't think there's anything in the way of a haircut that could make me like my girl any less. But if you'll unwrap that package, you may see why you had me going for a while at first." Nimble fingers tore at the string and paper. And then an ecstatic scream of joy, and then, alas, a quick feminine change to hysterical tears and wails. For there lay the combs, the set of combs that Della had worshipped for so long in a Broadway window. Beautiful combs, pure tortoise shell, with jeweled rims, just the shade to wear in the beautiful, vanished hair. They were expensive combs, she knew, and her heart had simply craved and yearned over them without the least hope of possession. And now they were hers. But the tresses that should have adorned the coveted adornments were gone. But she hugged them to her bosom, and at length she was able to look up with dim eyes and a smile and say, "My hair grows so fast, Jim." And then Della leaped up like a little singed cat and cried, "Oh, oh!" Jim had not yet seen his beautiful present. She held it out to him eagerly upon her open palm. "Isn't it a dandy, Jim? I hunted all over town to find it. Give me your watch. I want to see how it looks on it." Instead of obeying, Jim tumbled down on the couch and put his hands under the back of his head and smiled. "Dell," said he, "let's put our Christmas presents away and keep 'em a while. They're too nice to use just now. I sold the watch to get the money to buy your combs. And now, suppose you put the chops on." The Magi, as you know, were wise men, wonderfully wise men who brought gifts to the babe in the manger. They invented the art of giving Christmas presents. Being wise, their gifts were no doubt wise ones, possibly bearing the privilege of exchange in case of duplication. And here I have lamely related to you the uneventful chronicle of two foolish children in a flat who most unwisely sacrificed for each other the greatest treasures of their house. But in a last word to the wise of these days, let it be said that of all who give gifts, these two were the wisest. They are the Magi.
Thank you so much, Joyce. And now we will hear from Shelley Clay. Shelley?
Hello, I will be reading The Red Mittens by Hartley F. Daly. 1934 was the worst year of the Great Depression, at least for farmers. That was the year Jane and I decided we just couldn't afford to buy Christmas presents. We didn't mind for ourselves, but for Linda, our only child, we hoped she would understand. There was a beautiful light blue coat, just her size, in the window of Lloyd's department store. Every time we would go to town, she would go and stare in the store window to see if it was still there. but the price was an impossible $12.95. It might just as well have been $100. Our nearest neighbor was Old Man Riggs, whose 500 acres lay between our place and the river. Old Charlie Riggs was the stingiest man in 3 counties, with a disposition like a sour apple. He was reputed to have money, but you never would have guessed it. He dressed like a tramp, and he drove a broken-down old Model T. He'd sit bolt upright, his big knobby hands holding the steering wheel in a grip like death. One of the most pressing problems for a farmer in the hill country is water. If you don't have access to a spring or a stream, you must have deep wells to get it. And at that time, before electricity came to the hills, you pumped it by hand. I had been trying for years to negotiate a right-of-way across Old Man Riggs' place to the river. Here I was, spending half my time pumping water for my animals, while across the narrowest point of Riggs' place, 50 yards from my pasture, was a whole river full. And it wasn't as if he needed it. He had over a mile of frontage, but he wouldn't sell me an inch. As Christmas approached, Jane was busy going through the attic, picking out things to make or remake and for materials to decorate with. Linda was an interested spectator. Then one day she came to me with a suggestion. "I want to give Mr. Riggs a Christmas present." I was thunderstruck, but I said, "What could you give Mr. Riggs?" "I'd have Mother make him some mittens like she makes for you." I blurted out, "Why, the old man would be too stingy to wear them if you did." I saw at once that I had made a mistake, for Linda hung her pretty head and began making circles with her toe. "Mr. Riggs is my friend," she said. "He lets me eat pears from that big tree in his yard." I wouldn't have been more surprised if she had said she had trained one of the local wildcats to catch mice in the kitchen. Myself, I wouldn't have given the old tightwad the time of day, but I couldn't deny Linda anything. I went down on my knees and took her in my arms. "Oh, honey, if you want to give Mr. Riggs some mittens, you go right ahead." Now, every winter, Jane made several pairs of zero mittens for me. These were mittens cut from the best parts of my worn-out overalls and lined with pieces of worn blankets. Then she knit some cuffs of yard and sewed them on. These were the mittens Linda wanted to give to Mr. Riggs. Jane cut 2 pairs for Old Man Riggs, but she left the sewing to Linda. She cut 1 pair from overalls, but she found an old skirt in the attic, I think the brightest red I ever saw, and she cut 1 pair from this. When they were finished, the mittens went into a box along with some of Jane's molasses cookies. Early on Christmas Eve, before dark, Linda took the box and left it on Riggs' porch. About 11 o'clock the next morning, my chores were done. I was sitting in the living room while Jane prepared our Christmas dinner. Suddenly, with a clatter like an earthquake in an old tin shop, Old Man Riggs' Model T turned into our drive. He had his usual death grip on the wheel, but on his hands were the flaming red mittens. He came to an abrupt halt just in front of the house and climbed painfully to the ground. He further mystified me by lifting a big cardboard grocery box from the rear seat. Then he marched right up to the front door, knocked, all while holding the box under his arm. After the briefest greetings, he asked for Linda. When she came in from the kitchen, he put his hand into the box and lifted something out. There, beautiful to behold, was the beloved, fabulous blue coat. Linda let out a wild cry of delight, and then after the manner of womankind, she began to sob. Mr. Riggs put his hand caressingly on her head with remarkable gentleness. "You know," he said, "I had a little girl just like you once, a long time ago, only her hair was red." He tried to say more, but only his lips moved. A moment later, Jane came in from the kitchen, and piling surprise upon surprise, Old Man Riggs again reached into his box. What he handed Jane was a hand-tooled leather bag that must have cost fully as much as the coat, Riggs turned to me and growled, "I hope you won't mind if I give your wife a Christmas present, John." It wasn't just common courtesy that made me ask Riggs to stay for dinner. The old man began to stammer and make excuses, but Jane would have none of this. "Nonsense, we've got plenty for everyone. Anyway, I've already set a place for you." Poor though we were, we never went hungry. The farm yielded an abundance of food, and Jane was a cook who could make a feast out of the plainest fare. I could tell the old man enjoyed the meal. There was a kind of dreamy look in his eyes. Once he looked at Jane, sort of stammered, and then remarked, "A man sort of forgets about a woman's way with food when he lives by himself." After the meal, Riggs sat in the living room with me for a while, enjoying a quiet moment. Finally, he put on his coat and started toward the door. "Gotta be about my chores," he explained. Then suddenly he turned to me and said, "You know, there's a place down at the end of my field where an old road used to go through. If you'll fence that off and run your stock down over it, it won't cost you a dime." As he slipped through the door, he waved his red mittens and said, "Merry Christmas! If you will bring your basket to my house, I will fill it up with some of them pears for your folks." The red mittens.
Are you loving these stories like I am? So good to hear. And now we're going to hear from Leah Scroggin. Leah?
Hello, I'm reading the story. It's the Christmas Story of Wally by Dina Donahue. Wally was 9 years old and in the 2nd grade, though he should have been in the 4th. He was big and clumsy, slow in movement and mind, but well liked by the other children in the class, all of whom were smaller than he. At times, the boys did have trouble hiding their irritation when the uncoordinated Wally would ask to play ball with them. He would stand by, not sulking, but hoping. Always a helpful boy, willing and smiling, the natural protector of any child he felt was being mistreated. As Christmas time approached, plans were made for the annual school pageant. Children were being assigned their parts: angels, shepherds, wise men, Mary and Joseph. Wally stood by expectantly. Then suddenly his joy knew no bounds, for he heard the teacher say, "Wally, I want you to be the innkeeper." Not many lines to learn, she reasoned, and his size would make his refusal of lodging to Joseph more forceful. Little did that teacher dream the lesson that such a tender-hearted boy would teach to all who would attend that program. Then came the rehearsals, with a manger, beards, crowns, and a stage full of squeaky voices. Most caught up in the magic of the night was Wally. He would stand in the wings, watching the performance with fascination. His teacher had to make sure he did not wander on stage before his cue. Then came the long-awaited night, and Wally stood holding a lantern by the door of the inn, watching as the children who portrayed Mary and Joseph came near him. "What do you want?" Wally asked with a brusque gesture. "We seek lodging." "Seek it elsewhere. The inn is filled." "Sir, we have asked everywhere in vain. We have traveled far and are very weary." "There is no room in this inn for you." Wally looked properly stern. "Please, good innkeeper, this is my wife. She is heavy with child and needs a place to rest. Surely you must have some small corner for her. She is so tired." Now, for the first time, the innkeeper relaxed his stiff stance and looked down at Mary. With that, there was a long pause, and the audience became a bit tense. The prompter whispered from the wing of the stage, "No, be gone." "No, be gone," Wally repeated automatically. Joseph sadly placed his arm around Mary, and Mary laid her head upon her husband's shoulder, and the two of them started to move away. The innkeeper did not return inside his inn, however. Wally stood there in the doorway watching the forlorn couple, his mouth open, his brow creased with concern, his eyes filling unmistakably with tears. And suddenly, this Christmas pageant became different from all others. "Don't go, Joseph," Wally called out. "Bring Mary back." And Wally's face grew into a bright smile. "You can have my room." A burst of laughter, then silence. Then tears flowed freely as a message came through to the listeners. Wally, the boy considered slow, had made room for Jesus. He could not turn Mary and Joseph away. God's only begotten Son would be welcomed by him. His tender heart had made room for the Savior.
Thank you, Leah. One of those little stories that you'll hold in your heart and think, that was so wonderful. Well, now we're going to have a reading by Lynn Wentz. Lynn?
Hi, I'm Lynn, and I have a special Christmas poem written by Jesus for you. If you look for me at Christmas, you won't need a special star. I'm no longer just in Bethlehem. I'm right there where you are. You may not be aware of me amid the celebrations. You'll have to look beyond the stores and all the decorations. But if you take a moment from your list of things to do and listen to your heart, you'll find I'm waiting there for you. You're the one I want to be with. You're the reason that I came. And you'll find me in the stillness as I'm whispering your name. Love, Jesus.
Indeed, Jesus does love us, each and every one, and that's why he came. Our Heavenly Father sent him so that the world would know of love. And so we're going to end now our time together with the Christmas story, the best Christmas story ever, the one that we find in the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke. And so our readers are going to come back one at a time, each reading a special part, and then we'll close with a prayer. Shelley?
And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. And all went to be taxed, every one into his own city. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, out of the city of Nazareth, into Judea, unto the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be taxed with Mary his espoused wife, being great with child. And so it was that, while they were there, the days were accomplished that she should be delivered. And she brought forth her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn.
And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them, and they were sore afraid. And the angel said unto them, Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. And this shall be a sign unto you. Ye shall find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men.
And it came to pass, as the angels were gone away from them into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, Let us now go even unto Bethlehem, and see this thing which is come to pass, which the Lord hath made known to us. And they came with haste, and found Mary and Joseph and the babe lying in a manger. And when they had seen it, they made known abroad the saying which was told them concerning this child. And all they that heard it wondered at those things which were told them by the shepherds. But Mary kept all these things and pondered them in her heart. And the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things that they had heard and seen, as it was told unto them.
Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east of Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born, King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where Christ should be born. And they said unto him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for this is written by the prophet, And thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not the least among the prince of Judah. For out of thee shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel.
Then Herod, when he had privately called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, and said, Go and search diligently for the young child, and when you have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also. When they had heard the king, they departed. And lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. And when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary, his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold, and frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned of God in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way.
And so now you have heard the Christmas story. We have the manger scene here that reminds us of all who came to worship that first Christmas. And the shepherds left with joy, telling everyone. And the wise men, when they found Jesus too, were filled with exceeding joy. And that is our prayer for you this season, even though it might not be like other Christmases. And may there challenges that you're facing in your life, know that Jesus has come to be with you, for he is Emmanuel, God with us. So may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you, to be gracious unto you, and may the Lord look upon you with his sweet favor and give you his wonderful Christmas peace. In the name of the Father, in the name of the Son, and in the name of the Holy Spirit, we wish you a Merry Christmas.